Okay, I just want to start with a few things before we start for people who don't know about the art market. And these are some statistics that you're all going to have fun with. And we're going to have lots of fun here tonight. We definitely are. Okay. Ready? Even though the art market has crashed by 10% in 2023, I don't know if any of you felt this before, but according to Fortune magazine, between 1995 and 2022, the art market does better than the stock market. Your annual compound, which is the interest accrued by the art market, is at a 12.6%, where through stocks is only 10%. So if anyone out there wants to invest in art, you know who to talk to. Any one of us five will be perfect for you. Right? And this is even more interesting. The biggest buyers of art are millennials. They spent the most money and bought the most art, besides the uber wealthy who always can buy art. But the millennials are the biggest buyers of art as right now. And only 1 in 10 artists make more than 100K, which is interesting. 85% of artists make under $25,000 a year. Anybody want to add to any of that?
It makes sense.
Right, it makes sense.
Yes.
So it's a little bit tough.
Well, I would add
Go ahead.
that the market now, it used to be when I started, it was collectors. Now, the money market guys have come in and they buy from these major galleries that have galleries all over the world, and they know that, before Gagosian does a show, he puts it up for auction, they buy it back under a false name, and then all these guys come in and buy it for the price that he's set on it, and they just know that these galleries will never let it drop.
Well, Damien
So
Hirst did
it's-
that with
yeah.
his diamond-encrusted skull. He put it up for auction and kept on outbidding. Him and his friend outbid each other to raise the value of it. So that's how he keeps his value prices high.
And that's done by a lot of different artists on lots of different levels. So sometimes you'll hear someone say, oh, my work just sold for so-and-so. And I'm like, it leads you to, sometimes it's very suspicious. So you know that someone behind them, whether it's their dealer, someone that they know has purchased it, and then again, it will come back later.
Yeah, correct. Very, very true. Very, very true. Galleries, so let's start here. Well, let's start with the museums. I know that, so first off, Christina, you're now at the Arts Center, Southampton Arts Center, and you were at a museum. What is the difference between these two venues?
Well, at the Southampton Arts Center, we don't have a permanent collection. Guildhall was an accredited museum from the American Association of Museums, and there's only 800 accredited museums in the United States. So just think about that. There's over like 80,000 museums, but only 800 were accredited, which means that you have to have a certain number of standards, how you treat the art, how you store the art, how you collect it, who's in charge of it, rules and regulations, what's your criteria for collecting art. And so that is a very big, significant difference. Storing art and collecting art is very expensive. It's to house the artwork, unless you have your own housing on site, it really is very, very costly. So at the Southampton Art Center, we do not have we're a gallery space. We're not a museum, and we're allowed to show whatever we want. We can sell work from the gallery, which is really wonderful.
Sold one of my pieces there.
So you can sell work, but you could also just display work, which gives you a lot of different opportunities. And for me, I think it's a good place to be right now, because we can show a variety of art. You can show world-class art, work that's worth millions, and at the same time, we can show under-recognized artists. So I love that opportunity.
All right, so if someone wanted to get into a museum, and Kathryn will come in on this one, because a lot of artists have to start at the gallery level first before they get into a museum, usually. Galleries can help an artist get into a museum, but how does an artist get into a museum?
Well, we had, and most museums have a committee. We did have criteria who could be people would either want to donate something to the collection. So we had the criteria. Was it an artist? Had the artist exhibited in other galleries? Had they exhibited in other museums? Were they in other private collections? Were they in public collections? So that was the criteria. We wanted to make sure that it was someone. We didn't accept anything like if you had never exhibited before. So you had to have a reputation. At Guildhall, our mission statement was to show artists who lived and worked in the area. So that was also part of their criteria. We could not accept a Picasso, you know, or we could accept it to sell it, but we couldn't accept it to have in the permanent collection. So each museum has their own rules and regulations. Then we had a committee. I would have to then show all the work that I thought was worthwhile to the committee. The committee would vote on it, yes or no. If they voted yes, the majority, it would come into the collection. If they voted no, it would not. Okay. I would recommend sometimes. Early on in my career, I think it was much easier because the committee totally was composed of a lot of people who really were collectors and who really cared about the local community of artists. And so when I would recommend an artist who had been exhibiting locally for a number of years, they would often say, yes, that should be part of the collection because this artist was part of our history. At the end, that wasn't necessarily so. So it wasn't as easy to get artists' work into the collection.
Well,
interesting.
I want to ask you a question as opposed to as how many artists were donated and how many did you pay for?
The majority were donated.
Right. So
And-
even if
yeah.
people want to donate to a museum, it's not necessarily easy to get the work in.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And that tends to be for most museums around the country. Because, of course, accepting a piece of art requires financial backing to keep it
Absolutely.
and maintain it.
Absolutely. That's the commitment. And again, that's part of the American Association of Museums. So when you're bringing something into the collection, you have to maintain it, you have to care for it, and you have to preserve it for future generations.
Interesting. So also a little statistic in 2023, I love statistics, 176 million people visited museums in America. Museums are making their comeback after the pandemic. There was a big slack off, and now they're making their comeback. They're almost equal to pre-pandemic. Interesting, though, going from museums to galleries. Galleries, 85% of galleries fail.
Yes.
So how are you in business since 1976?
Persistence. Persistence counts.
Okay.
Well, you know, over the years, I developed a certain sensibility. And when I first started, I tried to give people what I thought they wanted. And that failed tremendously because someone would say, oh, I need a purple nude to go over my bed, and it needs to be holding an orange, and it needs to be 46.5 inches. I would find that thing after a year, and I would show it to them, and they would go, no, that's not really what I wanted. So I figured that was just not a way to sell art. So I developed, over the years, I developed my own sensibility, and the people who like it, and the people who don't. So maintaining that and over years developing clientele that does like it has enabled me to stay in business for almost 50 years.
Has any of your artists gone on to be in a museum?
Some of them have, and most of them haven't, because mostly the work that I show is not necessarily within the contemporary conversation, as you would say. Mm-hmm. So most of my artists are what I call journeyman artists. They're artists that work every day and have very serious practices, but aren't necessarily part of the ongoing whatever the art world needs, be it art about gender or art about politics or art about the environment or anything. I like beautiful things, and that has not necessarily been part of the conversation until recently. Very recently, you're finding that a lot of collectors don't mind if something's beautiful. So I'm doing very well now.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
People have permission to like something that's beautiful. So.
Just so everyone knows, to be in a museum is a lot of validation for an artist. It helps them allow their own
Yes, for
self-validation.
sure.
Once they are accepted into a museum, it's a big deal. And even for artists to be accepted and have a gallery representation, and Steve and I have talked about this before, how artists need, or how do you feel, Steve, about artists having gallery representation compared to not? And this is good for Ned, too, because Ned, you don't have gallery representation. You've been doing it on your own pretty much your entire career.
No, you had gallery representation.
I know that Leo Castelli was one of your first visitors to your studio, so
my first show was given to me by a guy named Gordon Matta Clark. And
wow.
I was hitching back from working, building a house in Aspen, and I got to New Jersey, and a truck pulled over. "Where you going, kid?" And I said, "I'm going to New York." They said, "We're going to New York, hop in." And I got in the back, and they were talking about Leo Castelli. And I'm kind of like, what? And it was Keith Saunier and a guy named Dickie Landry, who was the saxophone player for Phil Glass, and put Phil's band together. And when we got to West Broadway, and I had a studio over on Delancey Street, they let me out. And as I got out, Dickie said, "What are you going to do, kid?" And I said, "I need a job." And he said, "Oh, go to the corner of Prince and Worcester." And that was food restaurant that Gordon Matta Clark had started. So I walked up, the windows were all soaped up, but there were kind of these paste-ups, busboy, waiter, dishwasher. Oh, I can do that. So I went in, and Gordon's girlfriend at the time was the manager, and she walked out, and she said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, do you have a job?" And she looked at me, and she said, "You want to be assistant chef?" I had never cooked, right? And I said, "Well, what do I have to do?" And she said, "Well, you know, you're going to work under," and at that point, food was started by all these Cajuns that had come up to, you know, they were sculptors, they were musicians, you know, other people in Phil's band were dishwashers, but they all were amazing cooks. And so Gordon, you know, you'd go to someone's house and they'd be making an étouffée or a gumbo or whatever. And Gordon said, "We need a place where we can all hang and go and eat." And so he started that restaurant. But I met Gordon. I cut all of his pieces. He came to my studio over on Delancey Street, and he really liked this work I was doing. And so he gave me my first show at 112 Green Street. But then at 112, all those people, Gordon, Richard Nonis, Dickie Landry, all these guys that had been working there, Mary Heilman, we all went to Holly Solomon Gallery.
Right.
Okay,
So, and I stayed, and that was in 75, and I stayed, the last show I did with Holly was in 85, and she came to me and she said, and I'd started doing commissions in 78, and she said, "I want 50% of what you get for a commission." And I said, "I don't make 50%. What are you talking about? It costs an enormous amount of money to make these 5-block pieces and 35-foot, you know, facades and things like that." She said, "No, that's what I want." And I went to Leo, because I knew him, and I said, "Leo, would you tell me, what is Richard Serra, what do you make when Richard Serra sells a big piece?" And he says, "Well, I take 10% of what he makes." I said, "Really? How does that work?" And he said, "Well, I advertise it, and then I sell a lot of his work from the gallery." So I went back to Holly, and she says, "No, I want 50%. So I just left the gallery. And that was the last time.
That was the last time you had a gallery.
Yeah.
Fun.
But
So that's 1985 is the last time you had a gallery?
yeah. Well, I left in 86. I was supposed to I'd done this whole show for 87, and, but I walked away from it.
Interesting note about your father, and I want to know how much of an influence he was, Craig Hughes Smyth. He was a Renaissance art historian of notoriety, and he established the Allied collecting point in Munich for Nazi-looted art. How much of an influence was he? Because that's an amazing man.
Well, at the end of the war, he was put in charge of the Munich collecting point. So he was a monuments man. The movie of Monuments Man was about something totally different. They were all art historians that went into the salt mines, got the work, brought it back, figured out where it had been stolen from, and he did some conservation and then sent it back. But when he came back to the States, he started working, he was put in charge of the Institute of Fine Arts, which was NYU's graduate school for art history, conservation, and all that. And he did that forever. He retired from that, and then he went to ITATI, which was Harvard's Institute for Renaissance Study. And Bernard Berenson, who had collected all this work for the museum up in Boston, collected a lot of it for himself. And he owned an entire mountain outside of Florence. And they had people, you know, researching art history, literature, anything to do with the Renaissance. They made their own white wine. They made their own red wine. They grew vegetables. I mean, it was an amazing place, but he did that. But as soon as I was born, he was writing all the time about Renaissance. And so we went to Italy when I was 1, and we lived in Florence. And I had my mom got someone to take care of me
You had a
at certain
nanny?
days, a nanny. And, she took me around and all this kind of stuff. And at the end of a year and a half, we drove up to Paris to get on a boat back to America. And I walked real early, and I kind of ran ahead of them and went into the Louvre. And when my parents came in, I was on the floor genuflecting. Now, we weren't Catholic. I wasn't raised religious on any level, but obviously the nanny had taught me this is what you do when you go into a church. But my dad, I went back there when I was 10 and 11. We lived in Rome. I was dragged to he'd be doing research about a church or about a certain artist in a church. We would go down and see the Greek temples in the south of Italy and stuff like that. So it's interesting, when I was in college, and I was a dyslexic kid, and writing a paper in college was impossible. And I was also a jock and high score in the Midwest, but whatever, I just said, I can't write a paper. And someone said, well, take an art course. And I took an art course, and the guy who taught it had gone to Yale and studied under Albers, and the course was a color course. Mm-hmm. And it was the first time I met people that weren't jocks, and we loved this. This course was amazing. And
where were you in school?
a place called Kenyon in Ohio.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
So the Joseph Albers course you
it
took?
was Albers developed, well, all
did
those
colors.
paintings.
Yeah, he's the
but he was a
master of color
colorist.
theory.
But he also made these, you got this box with papers with every color you can imagine. And so it was, how do you make two colors look like one? Or how do you make this color vibrate when it's next to this one? And it was really exciting. And it kind of, I thought, oh, well, I'm going to take more art courses, and which I did. And in the end,
here you are.
in the end, my senior year, I was doing independent projects, and this head of the art department said, Ned, we really like what you're doing. We're going to put it in the museum. I said, cool, that's cool. And then, like 2 days before or a day before I was going to graduate, he called and he said, you know, the president of the school called me and said, we have a guy getting an honorary degree, and he asked me to take him on a tour. So I did, and when he got up into the museum, he saw your pieces. He really liked them. Can you meet us there? Okay. And I went in, and it was Noguchi.
Oh, wow.
Who knew?
Wow.
And I didn't know who he was. And he said, what are you going to do, kid? And I hadn't thought about anything after graduation. But one of my friends had gone to Yale, and another one had gone to New York. And so just to get through the question, I said, I don't know, Yale, I'll go to New York. And he looked at me, and Noguchi looked at me, and he says, you want to teach? And because I grew up with a father who was a professor and all that, I said, no, I don't want to teach. He said, well, don't go to Yale. Go to New York. If you're any good, it'll happen. And if you're not, you'll get on with your life.
And you did. You certainly did, didn't you? That's not a joke. And Steve. Okay, so now Steve takes his art. Now, Steve, you were with the gallery for a while?
Yeah, I've worked with a few galleries. Anyway, thank you for letting me join this experienced group of people
It's
here.
a total experiment tonight. It is the first show. So I don't have no format down yet, so just bear with us. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, one thing I did want to mention was art can be a good investment, and it's all about timing. And,
Okay.
and you know, I founded it, not many people in our world know this, it's a deep, dirty secret. I founded a commodities trading firm, and, you know, that's a lot about trading. I did that in the 80s, and then I founded a software company, which you know about, called Arternal, and we brought data analytics into the art world. So we can talk about data, market, and analytics, but the question you originally asked me was about, I think, representation, and I think Ned really nailed it. It's about relationships, proximity to people that are influential and have power, and building those relationships more than anything else. And in my instance, I've had 7 solo museum shows. 3 of those were in Europe, which my gallery in Paris arranged all of those shows, one in Bordeaux, one in Marseille, and one in somewhere else. And the ones in the US were totally based on relationships that won at Brandeis. Nothing to do with gallery representation. Those shows actually happened because of, you know, knowing people and getting to know them better, and them being interested in what you're doing, engaging people in a deeper conversation. And data analytics is one of those things that, as an artist or as a dealer or anyone, you know the data analytics tell you when to engage in a deeper conversation. The deeper conversation is what either triggers the sale, the ability to get into the gallery, or, you know, the kinds of goals that you're trying to activate. So, you know, there's a lot of things we could talk about tonight. But the market right now is, you know, art right now is not, the secondary market is very, very weak. And
Yeah, they're saying it's more current artwork that is selling, not the secondary market.
correct. So we have like an inversion, like a weather inversion, you know, where people with huge reputations are selling for less than a first-year student out of Yale having their, you know, their first show of their career. So there's this huge market inversion going on right now. So if you're getting in on the game now in a new gallery and you went to Yale, you're really in a good position to, you know, to be successful. But the whole Yale thing is also about networks, you know.
And isn't that very true? I mean, I think when Robert Storr first went to Yale, that's when it really almost became that. So that all of these young students who were going into Yale, and he would bring all of these dealers and collectors to see their work. These were, you know, young graduate students, so they hadn't even gotten their master's degree. And all of a sudden, there was this that became the thing. You went there, you saw what these young artists were doing, you bought their artwork in the hopes that one of these New York galleries was going to pick them up, and then they would become the next superstar. And so their work suddenly, all of a sudden, you know, became the place, and that's why Yale is one of the schools that has that reputation.
So statistically, you know, a really great education at a good grad school is going to help you, you know, get into that gallery system through all the networks. But, you know, Ned and I would be perfect examples of people that are outside the gallery system. You know, I don't have representation right now, and yet, you know, I'm selling work, I'm showing work. So it's not, there's not one way. I think that's the one thing that I think it's really important for people to know is that a gallery, you know, I've been in galleries. I left a gallery, it was Josh Bear Gallery, to go with Baskerville and Watson, if you remember that
Oh, my
gallery.
heavens.
And I was the opening show in the fall, and in August they said, we're closing the gallery. You know, so I mean, you know, jumping to supposedly a better gallery isn't necessarily going to solve all your problems.
Do you think sales are better without a gallery these days because of online?
A lot of that.
Websites, social media, Instagram, 15% of sales are from online.
Yeah,
in the
I don't
art
think you can beat the gallery system, but it's not the only system, because I ran into somebody at a party the other week. He was a retired ad person, and he was deciding he wanted to be an artist. And he's telling me he's selling 30 to 40 works on paper a month. They were $300 each. They were abstract, very easy on the eyes, and, you know, that was his financial model. It was working for him.
And he did it online?
Yeah, totally Instagram.
Totally online,
Totally
right.
Instagram.
Well, it's totally, it's easy for artists today to do that and not be part of the gallery system. And of course, if you are part of the gallery system, you know, 50% of the money goes to the gallery and 50% goes to you.
Galleries have a
So
lot of
You
overhead.
can make
That's-
a
yeah.
lot more, you can do a whole lot better. But you have to be, you really do have to be a certain kind of person.
So-
And have a certain kind of personality that allows you to do that. There's so many artists that actually can't, that, you know, are just so involved with their studio practice and their lives that they, and are really afraid to go out in the world.
The
So they
other
need
thing is the
gallery.
paradigm shift, you know, of the gallery monopoly. You know, then it was, you know, people went to the internet. Now, and when I started doing websites, you know, it was like every artist, you had to have a website. Young artists don't do websites anymore.
No,
They
it's
do
Instagram.
and they do TikTok. So, you know, and, you know, my website is basically turned into my archive. So if you want to know something about me, you can go to my website, stevemiller.com, for what it's worth, and, you know, it'll be a complete archive of my history. But as a software developer, when we talk to galleries, and you can, you know, I know we have different experiences here, but if you ask most galleries, how much money do they make from actually selling directly from their website? You might be selling more from Instagram, but not from your website. So that's
Well, we
sort of,
sell from our, well, I mean, I do, but I'm very unusual because I have all of the work that we have in the gallery online all the time with prices, and I've had that for, I don't know, 20 years now. And the website is important to us.
but
that's-
didn't you tell me that Instagram was something that you were taking
oh my
advantage
God.
of?
Well,
She's got
Instagram's terrific too.
26,000 followers, right? You have a lot of
I
followers.
have, I don't know, 26? Yeah, something like that. But
A lot of
no,
followers.
but of course, I don't do this Instagram. I had an intern when she was 19. She's now 23, and she's been doing my Instagram for the past 4 years. And she understands exactly how to do it and when to do it and all this kind of stuff. And because of that, I think, since the beginning of the pandemic, I would say for the past 4 years, half of my clients are brand new and who I've never heard of. I have no idea who they are. And I assume that that's because my social media is so good. And
You do
that's
have a
this
strong
little
social
girl that
media.
I hired 4 years ago at the age of 19. So I love her.
Social media is
those.
really important, but I know that, like, if I ask the artist, like, someone comes over to me and they're like, okay, I'd love for you to see my work, and I would say, so do you have a website? And they're like, no, you can check out my Instagram. I'm not going to check out their Instagram.
Catherine
You're not
Catherine and
gonna-
I have had
no.
this talk, because
I'm not
Catherine
gonna
says
do
you
it.
need a website.
I really want them to have a package ready for me.
Well,
You know, again, I'm old school. Again, people used to drop off their slides and all the things like that, and I'm used to getting a complete package. So I want to see all of their reviews. I want to see all the places where they've exhibited. I want it to come to me. I don't want to have to do homework for
Well,
for it.
and when an artist comes to me and says, will you look at my work? And I'll say, send me a link to your website. And if they say, I don't have a website, I say, get one, and I'm doing you a favor.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Because again, when I have to show like my collector, my museum committee, or now my committee, my programming committee, I'm interested in showing this artist. They're not going to go scrolling through someone's Instagram
Yeah,
account. They really
Instagram,
have
yeah.
to have a website so they can go directly. I can give them the link, and then they can look it up.
And they can go to Instagram from the website.
Absolutely.
But if you're
Absolutely.
being, ambitious, if you're starting out and you want to figure this out, you should do a website.
Yes.
You should have active Instagram
Yeah, but if you've
presence.
been around like you,
If you're
yeah.
into TikTok and you can work that, and you
Oy.
can do reels, you should do all of that stuff. It's about eyeballs. That's another data point. The
I
more
know that-
eyeballs that see you, the
Yeah,
more
I
chance.
noticed with a lot of people who have a lot of followers, it's usually videos of themselves, not just photographs. Like a photograph on Instagram isn't going to sell things as much as someone walking around with the microphone saying,
We do all of it.
You do a lot of that.
We do all
and
of it. We
that's
do
how
videos and
that picks up a lot of followers.
right. And it's fun, but it's fun. It's good.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's a very wise idea. But we had that talk about websites, Kathryn, when we met, that you felt that websites are very, very important. And they're easy to build these days.
I
You
know.
can go to
And-
Wix.com and build a website super easily.
And older people who say, "Oh, I don't want a website," I say, "You've got neighbors who are 15 years old who can do it for you. That's why you have children and neighbors, and make them do it."
We
know?
need the young kids to do the TikTok thing. I know nothing. Yeah, I know nothing about TikTok.
Oh, the TikTok. Well,
Yeah, I don't do those dances.
like the Facebook.
Facebook is for older people. I'm good at Facebook. And it's when the TikTok, I don't think I've ever looked at it.
But now you almost have to do it all. You really, to be more relevant, you really have to be involved in all the platforms.
I know. And then you have to see what platform, and things change all the time in the art world. Like
Oh, my
Facebook
Lord.
was the big one, then Instagram. Now it's TikTok, which they're saying is like the biggest one. So right now, and that'll change too.
But as an
Right now,
artist,
it's
you
all be
also
gone.
have to make the decision, how much time am I going to spend doing this?
That's just it,
right?
the reels.
They take time, so you have to balance out actually making work against
That's
getting,
one of the reasons
getting
you have a
finding
gallery.
eyeballs. And that's every individual is different. They have to figure that out for themselves.
That's one
Right.
reason you have a young assistant, because they can do that really quickly.
Well,
The editing of those things.
I met a guy who had worked for Mary Boone. I met two of them, and I showed briefly with one of them, but he introduced me to this other guy, and he was great at designing websites. So a long time ago, he built my website, and if a new commission comes in or a new body of work, I just send images and he puts it on. I don't have to do it at all.
I don't do it either. So.
I do it all myself.
Steve, I want to ask, because we talked about artists working in different careers, and I think what you've done is you've also transformed your own artwork into products that you're selling. And I always thought that was like a great thing for an artist to do. And so many artists I discovered over the years were involved. John Chamberlain did sculptures, and he did furniture, and he sold other things, and other artists, had real estate on the side. So I think what you've done, though, I think is wonderful, because you've incorporated your artwork into the products that you're selling, whether it's a skateboard,
Or
a
the
surfboard, a
scarves, the
scarf.
scarves are
He's
so
got the most
beautiful.
amazing silk.
Oh, my gosh.
They're beautiful scarves. They're absolutely
But
stunning.
the whole strategy on that is that you're in a gallery, you get a show every 2 years, it's up for 3 weeks, whatever.
That's
300
that's the
people-
old school gallery. You had to show every
All
2
your
years.
friends see it.
300
all your
people
friends go.
come to the,
About
to the
300
opening,
friends.
and I'm going this is a really, challenging model to work with.
When did you start merchandising?
I
merchandise is a big seller
Well, I
for
was spending a
events.
lot of time in Brazil, and so in 2005, and I was I started this project to X-ray the Amazon, and the idea was if the lungs of the Amazon represent, if the Amazon is the lungs of the planet, I'd X-ray the lungs and give the world metaphorically a medical checkup. So.
Wait, one sec. Hudson, is there any way you could put up just Steve's work right now?
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Picture.
So
Okay.
this will do it.
We got it
So
together.
one of the things was, how to avoid this like gallery stigma and get your work out to different audiences. And the other thing is, so I went into the Amazon, I got these alligators, and we took the alligators to a hospital. We x-rayed the alligators, and instead of killing the alligator, stuffing it, and putting it on the wall, I thought, well, maybe I could also do this eco trophy. So I own the trademark Health of the Planet. Lots of contradictions because it's an oil-based petroleum product that surfboards are made of, sadly. But at any rate, so I was asked to donate, stuff to the Brazil Foundation. I meet a guy. I just started talking to this guy named Oscar, and it's the same story you're telling me. You're just talking to this guy. You don't know who it is, and he had just been to a town called Belém, where I had been, which means Bethlehem in Portuguese. And I'm going it's in the middle of nowhere. I'm going what are you doing there? He goes, well, I was looking for fabrics and materials, and I asked him if he's an artist, et cetera, and he ran a company called Osculin, which was the slide that came after that. It's like American Apparel meets Prada, and it's a very, very hip, cool label in Brazil. And I said, I got some really great ideas for you. Now, I had done some stuff for Chanel, which ended up in a lawsuit, so we can talk about,
That sounds like fun.
that's another conversation. But at any rate, eventually, we started putting my designs on his clothing, and this is some of the designs of piranhas on the left, iguana, bird of paradise, x-ray. So the idea was doing these surfboards, skate decks. The surfboards in Brazil are like trophies. Everybody's got one. They've got 3,000 miles of water, right? So you see them everywhere. I thought, well, this is a great object to communicate an environmental issue, because water, as you know, is just a huge problem in Brazil right now. And because they've deforested the Amazon and all the water's running off. But it was just a way to me to try to see if I could keep this dialogue that might happen I didn't think the art gallery was the only place for this dialogue to happen. I thought it might be interesting to get it out in the public. So I started doing skate decks, surfboards, clothing. Then I got involved in Mongolian cashmere, which, some of you have seen.
Fantastic.
I never saw the Mongolian cashmere. I'm interested.
But they're not huge. I mean, it's about getting your work out there. They're not financially hugely successful. I do sell the stuff, but,
Costs a lot to produce this stuff. It's
Yeah.
like we had the conversation about books. It's the same thing.
Right. I make a lot of books, too.
You have to make a lot of books.
And
too.
books are really great. I've been fortunate because I got a book deal from a publisher. And this is how weirdly people go, how'd that happen? I had those x-ray prints at a furniture store in 2016 in Hudson, New York. And a publisher saw them and wrote me and said, why don't you have a book? And she just wanted to do the prints, the x-rays. And then I talked her into doing, let's do skate decks and surfboards and, kind of flesh it out. And so that was the first book, Radiology. Second book was called Surf Skate, really about process and lifestyle, because we thought that might sell books. It didn't. And then the last one was Neil deGrasse Tyson, called Surfing the Cosmos.
My favorite man. I love him.
Yeah, thanks.
There's something very special about a book. I just did a show called Look at the Book, and that Karyn was in. But there's something that's, when people say, well, you can just do an online book. No, it's
No.
not the
You
same.
don't feel
You'll never feel it. It'll never feel the same to you. When you show a collector, and I really feel that I know artists who've created their own books, self-published them, and then they show, when they're showing at a gallery show or wherever, and they present this book to the collector. I know I've seen it when I presented this book to the museum committee. All of a sudden, they're like, oh, there's a book. And there's a totally different frame of reference for it. So it's kind of interesting. So part of your whole presentation, your website, if you have a book, if you have a portfolio with your material in it to really show someone, it really goes a long way.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because at the beginning of COVID, a friend of mine who had been a designer for Ringling Brothers Circus, doing all those posters, and then he left them, and he was doing design for the Republicans, for the Democrats, for the post office, and now he's doing all the catalogs for the museums in D.C. Anyway, he calls me up, and he thought with COVID his business was going to die. And he said, Ned, isn't it time for you to do a book? And my dad had always said, you need a book, because in academics it's publish or perish. And I was just making the work. Why would I don't want to, So when he said that, I said, well, how do I start? And he said, well, make an outline. So I started to make an outline, and it went from my earliest work in 1971, and all the shows that I had done with James Mayer in London and Zvern, all these different galleries that I showed in Europe. But, and then the middle section was all my commissions, and the third section was work that I did while I was doing the commissions, which is what I'm kind of showing now. And
Can we get a Ned Smyth image up?
yeah, that was a show at Grounds for Sculpture, and these are all found stones that when I found them, I started photographing them, but then I scanned them, and then I could carve them at 10, 15 feet. And they're carved out of the cheapest foam, but then we put a harder surface on it, and I use that to make molds to cast them in bronze. Anyway, my work had been, originally, you said about my dad, because I was taken to all these churches and temples, it was really about reverence. And it wasn't about, it's so funny, after my first show at Holly's, what Dennis Oppenheim was there. And I went in the next day to talk to Holly, and she said, Dennis saw your show, and he said, is Ned a Catholic?
Well, it seems very architectural at the
It is
time.
architectural, and it's more like reverent spaces.
Right, I always got that.
But it wasn't about I said Catholicism. So the next show I did with a painter friend of mine, we went back to one of the earliest reverent spaces, the garden, which is in Christianity, but also in a lot of different religions. And he did all the paintings, and I did kind of palm arcades and all this that went with it. But it was always about reverence. And when I moved, I built I bought 8 acres on Shelter Island. I built a studio over there, and half of the building underneath you can drive in for storage, because sculptors, Holly never sold my environments. I own almost everything. She could, when I made small things, she sold them, but so I needed all this space to store because it cost a fortune to have it in storage places. And but as I was bringing stuff, there was a milk crate filled with stones, anywhere from this height to this height. And what are these? I didn't remember collecting them. And it made me, there were some that were kind of blew my mind, because there were two, I don't think I have a copy in here, but one that looks like a classical female figure, and one that looks like a male figure.
They're back there.
Oh, yes, those. So I found those stones are this high. And I photographed them and blew them up, but I could scan them, because I thought, what's great about this is nature's made. And the stones were matter, which life grows on. And at a certain point, I couldn't find a stone. And I would come back to my truck like this with stones, and I had them all over the floor of my studio. But at a certain point, I couldn't find a stone. But I would come back with twigs that had washed up on the beach. And so I started to photograph those and cast them at different, and there's actually a show now at Springs Fireplace
Oh,
Yeah, the fireplace project.
that a woman from San Francisco had a gallery, stopped having the gallery, became an advisor. And a guy I had met doing a show on 57th Street left that gallery. He's an advisor. And he was asked to put together a show. So they have 4 people from the West Coast and 4 people from the East Coast.
And that's at the Fireplace Project, which is at 851 Springs Fireplace Road, a little bit past Ashwell Hall. Since we're talking about books,
Yeah, I'd like to say one
shamelessly
thing
doing
about
this,
that.
shamelessly. I wrote a book if you're an artist, so I'm going to take 101 tips for artists, no matter where you are in your creative journey. I'm going to take a few questions from this and ask you, then we're going to go into a lightning round for some jokes and some fun. Is everyone ready? And I color-coded everything because I am that crazy. Yes, I am. So, Ned, we're going to start with you since you're talking about your sculptures. One thing I have in my book is about mediums, medium. And we talked about this, about your sculptures. How important is it, because the person who fabricated these didn't know how to use the medium correctly. Remember you said it was squished and there was lines in it. We were talking about a few of your pieces that you had, the person who fabricated these. Remember he wasn't using the right foam or the right glue.
Well, no, these guys are professionals. And
The ones that you had, remember you had a few in there in your studio.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, this was at Grounds for Sculpture, and it was a place that started by Johnson. And he would make something this size, they would scan it, and then they could blow it up 30 feet tall or whatever, like Marilyn with her skirt blowing up. Anyway, I heard about it when I wanted to do these. Someone said, that's where you got to go. And they took the 3D model, they made the 3D model, then they hooked it up to a carver and did it. Then it was covered with a hard shell that protected it because it's just the cheapest of bubble foam. And then we used that to make the molds to cast it in bronze. But yeah, I mean, I don't remember about.
Yeah, there was something about they were showing seams or something, and he didn't use the right glue.
Oh, no. What happened is I had shown that male torso in front of Guildhall, and it was out for a year. And through the winter and everything like that. And it began to deteriorate. And so with frost and freeze and change of temperature, they cracked. So I had them all redone.
You have to use the right, basically, artists need to know the mediums that they use. Kathryn.
Yes, dear.
So we talked about this, having a gallery and have artists on Instagram. How do you feel about artists that sell behind the gallery?
They're more than welcome to do that, but I don't want to compete with them. So I can't sell their work if they're doing it. And they have to sort of make a choice. Either they accept the fact that I need 50% and that I'm going to show the work and be behind it, or they do it by themselves. And either way is perfectly wonderful, but I can't compete with people selling through their studio. It's just, they do it better than me.
I think that's just also a rule of thumb, that I think that if you're signing with a gallery, you have to be honest about it.
Yeah, you should respect it.
Loyalty,
And there's,
yeah.
there's certain things where if you're selling to your sister or, friends and family, and of course that's all fine. But no, I just can't compete.
Okay, and Christina, how do you feel when an artist, when you're in a gallery and you're having an art opening, any type of reception, when an artist comes up to you and says, "Excuse me, do you mind looking at my work?"
You
When
could
you're
ask
in
me
the
that
middle
too.
of an art fair, like Kathryn and I do, or at an artist reception.
I really think it's in very bad taste.
Yes, it's a major no-no.
It's a major no-no.
It's a
I think
major
that if
no-no.
someone says to you, I'd love for you to, I'd love to talk to you, I'd love to meet with you, I always say, absolutely, call my office on Monday morning.
After the fact.
After the fact. while I'm there, in a show, I have to be representing, the artists that are in the
Correct.
show, and that's where my attention has to be into the audience right then and there. I can't sit there and looking at your phone, and
I know.
and yet at every opening that happens.
That happens.
It happens
But
all the time.
It happens all the time, but all I do is say, send me a link to your website, send me a link to your website, send me a link to your website.
Again, the website,
Send me
very
a link to
important.
your
The website.
Get that
website.
website.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this one's for Steve. Looking for a gallery. Is it a lot of legwork for you to find a gallery that fits your style?
So what's the question?
Is it a lot of legwork to actually find someone? And then we're going to go into
You know,
lightning.
galleries are relationships, and it's like any kind of relationship. You have to really. I'm at a certain point now. Early on, and when you're younger, and you're eager, you'll have a relationship with anybody just to have a relationship. Right?
I remember those days.
Right, and yeah.
You're easy.
As you get older and you have more experience, and this goes with all relationships, you tend to be more, your needs are very clear, and you know what you want to get out of the relationship. So I think early in a career, show anywhere, it doesn't matter. And as you get farther along the road, you really want it to be something special. Otherwise, it's not worth the effort. If it's special, of course, the dealer's working hard for you. You're working with the dealer together as a team, and that's a great relationship, as you would with any good partner. So, to answer your question, yes, it's a lot of legwork because you're starting at the bottom of the early stages of your development and making every mistake until you kind of learn and grow and understand what you want.
I just want to throw in, I was an artist I know who's very well known. He was sort of at an A- level gallery, and that gallery was closing, and so he was immediately courted by the A+ galleries. And he was like, and there were several galleries that all wanted him, and I was like, so what are you going to do? And he said, well, it's like a marriage. I really have to really think it completely through. What are my goals? What are their goals? What do they see going forward? And it really was, I hadn't even thought about it that way, of course, but it is, he had to have a business plan for it. Like, when is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? When is that going to happen? And I still think that's important, even on when an artist is just beginning and they want to form a relationship with a gallery. And I know that artists have said, well, I really like working with Karyn because she shows me respect and X, Y, and Z. So those are all important factors. When you're an artist, you have to really see who the dealer is, what the dealer is going to offer you, what kind of a relationship you have, how honest the dealer can be with you. That's a very important
It's very
fact.
important, the honesty.
Yeah, just one more observation. There's different kinds of galleries, and some galleries are traders, and some galleries are investors. And there's,
And then there's some that just show what they like.
Exactly.
Like
So-
myself.
Some galleries are there
I mean,
just
and-
to make the money, and some galleries, you want a gallery that believes in your work. They're not there just to
Every
make money.
gallery
off
has a different,
Yes.
every art dealer, art gallerist has a different agenda, I think. And some start because they want to show their friends, some are a lot. Oh my gosh, now I think, I've talked to so many young dealers who were artists who don't feel like they can really make it, but they want to show their friends. And I'm seeing that a lot. with
we're
young
now
dealers.
seeing artists that are running galleries and have their own careers.
Yes, and that
I mean,
too.
it's just the paradigm.
Betty Parsons starts it
Before
all.
you could
back-
only be an artist,
Right.
Now you can be merchandising, you can run a gallery, you can have a crew. I mean, it's just wide open as to what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
I do it all. I do
Yes,
it all.
you do.
Yes, I do. I don't have galleries anymore, but I do art fairs, and I am an artist, and I do everything. I teach, I do everything, and now I have a talk show. Because why not? Why
Because
not?
why not?
Okay, so now we're going to go into our lightning round. You ready? We're going to start with you, Christina.
Oh, boy.
Okay. What's your favorite non-living artist?
Favorite non-living artist? Does it have to be contemporary or can it be?
Anybody who's just not alive.
Okay, I'm going to go with Leonardo da Vinci.
Interesting. Favorite color?
Blue.
Well, okay. What's the most memorable artist that you've ever worked with?
Oh, I can't answer that.
Okay.
Not in public.
Do you think vegetarians should eat animal crackers?
Say that again?
Do you think vegetarians should eat animal crackers?
No,
No. Okay.
absolutely not.
Good answer. Kathryn,
Yes.
what's your favorite non-living artist?
Matisse.
Okay. Favorite color?
Green.
Okay. Is there such a thing as objective beauty?
No. Well, maybe. Yes.
Okay.
Well, you switched.
That was, yeah, so
I
that's
did. Yes. Yes, I think there is.
So is double dipping at a party acceptable?
Yes.
Guilty. Okay, you ready,
Guilty.
Ned? You ready for this, Ned? Your favorite non-living artist?
Wow. I worked with a bunch of artists at 112 Green Street that was started by Gordon and a number of people, and none of them are alive.
No.
So Gordon Mata died very young. Richard Nonis, who I got him when he lost his place up in Soho. I got him a place down in Tribeca, and I used to make his pieces. And another guy, Gene Heistein, who was married to Alana Heiss. That kind of form, that was art school for me.
So those are your three favorite
So-
non-living artists, you think?
So, yeah, are they great? I'm not saying, but they had a big influence on me.
All right. And since you live on Shelter Island, how many average ticks do you get in a week? I had 4 when I left your studio.
I pulled one off
4.
this morning.
4 ticks?
I was in his yard for about 10 minutes. I'm on the Shelter Island ferry throwing ticks out the window.
No way.
Yeah, 4 ticks. I was outside for 10 minutes.
This year,
So I'm curious how many
because
ticks
winters
you
are
get in a week.
winters are so
Warm.
warm now. They haven't died off.
I know.
And if you just walk from my door to the car across lawn, you got ticks.
Yeah, I had a lot. We were outside for a very short time, and there were 4 ticks on me. I scrubbed and went home and showered that stuff off. Okay, you ready, Steve? Favorite non-living artist?
Hands down, Titian.
Wait a minute. One thing I forgot. Sorry. Favorite color? Ned.
It was blue, but I switched it to green.
No, we got blue and green here. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Steve. Your favorite non-living artist?
Titian.
Titian. Your favorite color?
Gray.
Really? You know it's not a real color. Since you're an avid cyclist, which Steve is a major cyclist, what is your best time from your house in Sagaponack to Montauk Lighthouse and back?
Ooh.
Best average speed, 18 miles an hour on that run. That's about 50 miles. That's about 3 hours.
3 hours. And do you think Jimmy Fallon is funny?
Is what?
Is Jimmy Fallon funny?
I think he tries too hard.
There you go. So that's basically it. We're going to end on that note. Anything you guys want to add to the conversation?
Well, you mentioned John Chamberlain making furniture. So when I started doing public art, I got Jerry Ordover, who was a lawyer for Leo Castelli, but also for Stella, all those, his people. And I was in, and he was writing contracts for me. And in the middle of our meeting, he got a call, and it was from a gallery that was showing John Chamberlain's furniture. And they had unwrapped the things and untied it and destroyed all the pieces because he would it was foam rubber,
foam rubber.
and he would tie it up and do things to it, and they thought, oh, it must be inside here, and they destroyed all the pieces.
When I first started, I used to write for the East Hampton Press many, many moons ago, and one of my first interviews was with John Chamberlain. I found him to be a very ornery man. Has anyone?
I did a show with him, and it's funny because I was warned by the person from Pace who was going to take me over. He goes, "I'm going to come with you because I don't want him to, whatever." And he was charming. I mean, I found him totally
maybe
charming.
he was just
Yeah.
in a mood
Yeah.
the day, because I was
Yeah.
just like, oh.
Yeah.
So-
He had a
I got a
reputation
good-
of being really salty, but he was very nice. to
Yeah,
me.
I got a really good interview out of him, though, that's for sure.
I met him the first time I ever was aware of him. I was cooking at food, and there was a waitress called Sarah Picasso. She'd married one of Picasso's sons, and then they had split. And she came in and she was freaked out. And I said, Sarah, what's wrong? And she said, well, I was on West Broadway and Prince, and a guy came up to me and said, do you like dogs? And she said, yeah. And he dropped on his hands and knees and started licking my feet. And he followed her all the way up to food, which was a block over. And she was like freaked out. And in came John Chamberlain.
Whoa. That's a
I
story.
don't know what to, I don't have a follow-up for that. I really don't. We're going to take questions from the audience in just 1 second. I just have a few little raffle tickets if you want to get your raffles out for some people in the audience to win some things.
Oh, we have raffle tickets.
Yeah, everyone got a raffle ticket when you walked in the door. Do you still have them? Okay, little pink things. The last number will be 07. Who's got 07?
I do.
You're going to get gifts anyway. 07, okay. What you have won, and we got to get your name after, tickets to see Michael Wolff, who is a famous Hampton Jazz, he's in the Hampton's Jazz Fest pianist, on Monday night at 6 p.m. Hey, Sarah. She's the drummer in my band. Good for you, Sarah. I'll meet you here. Okay. Next, ending in 11, the number 11. Okay, we have a little gift for you up here, and this is in honor of Miss Smyth. If you want to come up and grab it, and you're all going to get one of this too, because it's the only thing I can find. There you go. Oh, I teased you. There's not many people in the audience, so 08. Here you go.
Cool. Yay.
Teresa.
A winner.
Teresa was one of the best teachers in the East Hampton School District.
Oh, she's amazing.
Art teacher.
And I'm going to take Teresa's.
Probably influenced more students and young people to love art. So really kudos.
Okay, number 12. 12. Oh, here you go. You're
Two
gonna get
in
a copy
one
of my
group.
book.
That's not fair.
You're welcome. And number 6.
Yay.
I have a lot of my friends here. There you go. So, and these are for my 4 panelists.
Aw.
And who here wants to ask any questions? It's a little stressful.
Oh, it's a
So
rock.
we got a little stress.
It's an island.
It's a rock.
It is a rock. It is
It's
an
a rock. You want to come up and ask a question? Come on, right up to the mic. And then we're going to have a little wine and meet and greet so you can talk to the audience down on the floor, okay, outside. Okay, go ahead, Teresa.
Okay. What I wanted to ask is sort of 2 parts. One is AI, if it really influences the art today and all of you with what's going on. And also the fact that you can go to Home Goods and buy a piece of art for like next to nothing. And does that affect artists and what they're doing in trying to sell art? Kind of, I just feel like those 2 influences of AI and just, that kind of art.
I just want to say that I always tell people when if I'm like in one of these stores or whatever, people say, oh, I bought this at Home Goods, and I'm like, don't, really, go to an art fair and buy real art. You
Right.
can buy a print, whatever, but buy something that's real and that's not something that's just, hotel art that's going to be the same image in every hotel room or something like that. Buy original art. Yet at the same time, the artists who are creating that hotel art feel that they're making a living doing that. So it's a catch-22. But I think when you go to these places, I love to go to TJ Maxx. I love to go to Marshall's, all these stores.
don't buy
to
art.
look around. But I will never buy art there.
I don't see it, but
obviously.
you're not buying art
I'm
there.
not buying art there, I guarantee you.
Good, thanks.
AI is a whole nother panel.
Yeah,
You would
yeah.
know more about that than
Yeah, I don't even
think
think
anybody.
it's worth, the one sentence. I'm not really worried about AI because until, you know, I thought NFTs were really going to happen because young artists couldn't have studios, they couldn't afford materials and the digital way of seeing art on your telephone and trading it. I thought that made a lot of sense. So far, I'm wrong. And,
Good.
you
Yeah,
know,
I wasn't into.
I
they
thought
were
it was
so
going to happen, and it didn't.
Wait,
And I think AI has got a really long way to go. And I think one of the things about art is that there is, I mean, of course, there's photography, but there's also something about a direct human interaction. And I haven't seen an AI. I've seen some interesting AI stuff that I interviewed, and the person that invented the first chat, visual chat AI for Musée Magazine, if you want to look at the most recent issue. But it's a really complicated topic, and I don't think it's any threat, you know, for the
It
near
can't,
term.
I don't think it, I mean, I could be totally wrong, but to me, it can't be a threat because there's no hand. As far as I'm concerned, you know, the thing I'm always looking for is the brain and coming through and going to the hand. And you can't see, I mean, pixels are not a hand. And the hand makes something that I don't know if AI can ever replicate in pixels on a screen.
It's just too big a subject to touch
Right.
because,
It's a very
you know,
big subject.
photography
So,
doesn't
maybe-
have the hand either. So
Pardon?
photography doesn't have,
No, that's
photography is
true.
about framing. So AI can be about point of view.
Right.
And the, you know, the prompts are what, you know, if you can come up with a great prompt, you know, like, I'm just thinking like of an umbrella on an operating table, right? That's like
Right.
the surrealist prompt. But if you can come up with some amazing, it's a big
It's a
soft.
different, I mean, pixels are a different thing.
Set that
is
up for
what I'm
another
saying.
topic another time.
Well,
Good question.
Yeah, there you go.
The other thing I would say is, as a kid, being taken into churches in the summer, in August, when it's super hot, and you come in and it's bright, and you come into a church,
It's cool.
it takes a while for your eyes to adjust, and it's cooler. And then as a kid, as a 10-year-old, I'm aware of these columns that are solid stone this big around. And the environment was so moving, whether it was a Greek temple in southern Italy or a church. And that's what brought me into, I mean, I just made, a couple of summers ago, I carved a 24-ton stone sculpture that had this big oval sitting in a kind of scooped out base. And it was 16 feet long, 8 feet tall. And I had scanned the piece, and then we carved it out in Wisconsin at a place that carves a lot of stone columns and details for architects. And I found out about it, and we shipped it down to Florida. And so you get a gut feeling when you see something that has that weight to it. And I think that came from me as a kid,
Right,
walking
but you
into a
can't
church.
replicate that. You certainly can't replicate that.
Yeah.
No, the sense of space in sculpture and architecture. And of course, in the same thing I feel about hand making the mark. So,
Any other questions? That's it, only one question?
no more?
Okay, the debate's on, so let's,
Yeah, like everyone wants to hit that debate.
debate's going to start. Thank you to the panelists. Just a few things to say about Christina Strassfield. Right now at SAC, there is a post-graffiti show going on until July 20th on Job's Lane in Southampton. And this weekend is your big, is it the big?
It's a fundraiser. It's one of our fundraisers, and it's going to be a great party. It's called Whimsy Motown Magic. We have an 11-piece Motown band with an original performer from the Delphonics who are going to be performing. It's going to be a really fun evening. There's going to be food, dancing. You can sit. There's going to be chairs if you want to sit around. It is a fundraiser, and it helps us keep our doors open, helps us have free admission to the museum, to the galleries, and discounted admission to all the other programs that we do. So if you are so inclined, we'd love to see you there. 60s attire is optional.
It's gonna, oh yeah, 1960s attire. Steve, thank you for coming as well. So if anyone wants any new cool surfboards, you know where to find
Or
them.
scarves.
Thank you for the invite.
Scarves.
You're welcome. Kathryn, you have a show, I don't know how, Josette?
I have Josette Urso up right now
And
in my gallery on 10th Avenue between 20th and 21st, and then my gallery at 529 West 20. I am showing
Kai Anderson?
Kai Anderson.
Okay, I have that written.
Large-scale paintings. She's an artist from Kansas City, and beautiful.
Oh,
And
okay.
Josette is. They're both beautiful shows, I
All
have
right,
to
so
say.
that-
They're
that's
gorgeous.
at West Tw-
Her gallery no longer.
Oh, my
Your
gallery,
gallery in
in
Bridgehampton.
No, my gallery in Bridgehampton. Well, I opened a new one on 10th Avenue, and I closed the one in Bridgehampton.
The Women's Center, the Women's,
Yes.
what's the name of the full organization?
Watch.
Yeah,
WACH, Women's Arts Center of the Hamptons.
yes.
And
Women's Arts
the woman, Wendy Van Duzen,
Yep.
started it, and it's a nonprofit, and think she's going to be maybe activating the space with a lot of talks and knitting circles and that
Oh,
kind of thing.
excellent.
Be fun.
And Ned Smyth, your show is up at the at the Fireplace Project at 851 Springs Fireplace Road until July 7th.
And when is that open? Is it open
It's
just
open
during
now.
the weekend?
It opened, no. That's a good question.
June 22nd it opened.
It opened the 22nd, last Saturday.
Oh, uh-huh.
But,
I think I heard about that, but I'm
I
not on the
think-
mailing list.
But I think everyone,
How could I not be on the mailing list? Oh, well.
you have to give me your
Yeah,
email.
I didn't know about it.
I'm sure they
either.
have a website, the Fireplace Project.
Yeah, really. Where's your website? We all would have known about this.
Show me the website. Show me the website.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Meet and greet in the lobby with some wine.
right,
Thank you very
guys.
much.
Thank you.